see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. And today I'm here with Joan Duffell, who's Executive Director of Committee for Children, which is an organization in Seattle, as I understand, that you're fostering kind of work around children and kind of the well-being of children.
Correct. In fact, the way we think of our work is really social and emotional skills for children, empathy being a very core foundational skill in that area. So we're a nonprofit. We've been around for 30 years, and we do global work in developing social and emotional skills in children. We do this primarily by developing research-based curriculum programs that teachers teach these skills to children in the classroom. That's how we scale our work up. And we provide training for teachers in social and emotional learning, and then a lot of support for the implementation of our curricula. And teachers use it's a curriculum called Second Step, which is fairly ubiquitous in schools now. It's in 30,000 schools in the U.S. and in thousands more schools around the world. And we train teachers to teach this to kids, and these skills that they teach are skills like empathy, how to connect emotionally with another person, and how to show care and compassion for others. So often children don't know how to do these things. They may know that it's a value to do it, but they actually don't know how. And so our curricula actually teach them those rubrics, the skills for how to show empathy, how to solve a problem cooperatively, how to manage your emotions so that you can move through problem solving in a cooperative way.
So it sounds like empathy is a large part of your program then.
Yes, and it's a large part of our belief system about what is the most foundational thing that human beings need in order to live with each other in a healthy way. So if we don't have empathy, and we teach, for example, if we teach problem solving, but we don't have empathy, then we might have just a bunch of really skilled sociopaths out there, right? So we really want to begin our work, really the foundation for social skills and social and emotional skill development of children. The foundation is empathy, and we believe really must be empathy.
Well, we got connected through the Ashoka website. They're doing a competition. It's called Ashoka Activating Empathy, Transforming Schools to Teach What Matters. So it's Ashoka's doing this competition, worldwide competition for kind of best practices maybe around the schools, and you and I are both commentators on that. So
great.
So have you been connected with Ashoka long, or how?
You know, not for very long, for about the past year. Started making connections with Ashoka. Had heard of Ashoka for a long time, and have been a real fan of Ashoka's work. I love the way the Ashoka Foundation really lifts up people around the world who are doing this work. I was aware of their Ashoka Fellows program, and in fact, we really, because we look for great partners in other countries who might take our work to their schools, one of the things I've always believed is that Ashoka Fellows, that Ashoka has already done all this great work to find the right people, but those are people who are very likely to be people who would either want to bring our work into those countries or who would help us find the right people. So there's, in my mind, on a very practical level, there is a great potential connection between Committee for Children's work in disseminating and scaling up these teaching practices and learning in schools and the Ashoka Fellows program globally.
Well, I'm very grateful to their program because it's made the connection between you and I, so it's already been successful in that way.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm looking at, I'm from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and I'm looking at empathy from kind of the broadest terms. How do we kind of transform society? And schools are a small culture there as well. And so what are your kind of best practices for creating a culture of empathy within schools? What are your kind of ideas for doing that?
Well, we are a very research-based organization. We don't do this work just because we think it's nice. We do it because we think it actually is effective. And so the practices we engage and the content of the curriculum and the very teaching strategies that are used to teach these skills to children in our programs are very much based on research. What is the evidence that tells us that children can acquire these skills, under what conditions, and what are the teaching strategies that research has shown have the best promise for being effective in getting kids to acquire these skills. We work through schools for a couple of reasons. You might think we work through schools because that's where kids are. And so and it's another kind of foundational belief of ours is that it's very difficult to teach 40 and 50-year-olds empathy if they've never learned it. That's kind of, offender treatment programs. Mm-hmm. They're not very effective. They don't work very well. But empathy training is still the treatment of choice there, because even offender treatment programs for 40 or 50-year-old violent offenders realize that empathy is the missing ingredient for these guys or these people. So, but we kind of back up from that and say, really, when is the best developmental pathway for people to learn empathy skills? It's when they're little. And they learn empathy, the building blocks of empathy, in a very different way when they're 3, 4, and 5-year-olds than they do when they're 7, 8, and 9-year-olds. So we ground our work in developmental psychology. So we look at child development and say, when is it in children's natural pathway to acquire these skills? When is it actually their normal developmental task, instead of trying to force it in when it's an unnatural act, right? And we design our curricula to fit those developmental pathways. And again, very much very steeped in research that says, so if a 4-year-old is learning, say, a building block of empathy is simply decoding expression, because really 4-year-olds, we don't expect them, because their developmental pathway is to become a bit self-centered, because that's important for them at that moment in their development to actually get a sense of self. We know that they're not going to have their best work in expressing care and compassion for others at 4. But what they can learn is how to decode expression, because they're really into decoding at age 4. They're learning to decode letters. They learn to associate a letter with a sound. So, we can do the same thing with facial expression, body language, so that we're giving them the tools that when they are 5, 6, and 7 can start being translated into, now that I know how to decode expression, I can actually stand in that other person's shoes and take their perspective. And that's something I might not be able to do until I'm 6 or 7. But when I'm 6 and 7, I'm actually learning that naturally. That's my path. So we look for those teachable developmental pathways, and we insert the right teaching at the right time developmentally for kids. That's kind of the way we think of why we're working with children in the first place. And the other reason we work in schools is not just because kids are there, but because we think teaching social and emotional skills is actually an optimizer for academic learning. And new research has just come out to really back that up, that children who have stronger social and emotional competencies have much better academic outcomes. So there's a real what's in it for me kind of payoff for schools to actually spend their time and resource and teacher time, which is quite precious. Teaching time in a classroom it's not easy to get. So you have to be able to make the case that if we're going to spend time teaching this, that it's going to have a payoff for what the school is being evaluated on, which is not whether kids are empathic, frankly. They're evaluated on whether kids are successful academically. So we are really creating that link for schools to say, if you do this, you're going to also get this. And that's what you want. So in our latest version of our second step curriculum that just came out this year, in previous editions, we spent, really our whole focus was on social and emotional skills, empathy, social problem solving, emotion management, self-control, all of the core social skills you'd expect to see in a curriculum. And when we revised the program, we decided that we were going to start not just telling schools that if kids learn to be nicer people and more self-regulated, that they'd actually get better test scores, but we actually decided to start integrating social skills, social and emotional learning skills that have to do very expressly with academic performance. So now in the curriculum, beyond, in addition to still teaching very strong empathy skills and problem solving, how to take another person's perspective, all of those skills, we also teach the skills for learning that are social and emotional, such as how to listen, how to be an active listener, how to pay attention when someone's talking, how to use, and we actually literally use this little thing called an attentoscope, where the kids actually learn to focus their attention on something, because for many children that's a very difficult task. There are 50 things happening in the classroom at any given time. How do I focus on the one thing the teacher wants me to focus on right now? So we have started broadening the skills that we're teaching to include the skills that help children very specifically become better learners. And that has actually really increased the acceptance of our curriculum in schools, because teachers get that that's what I want. I want kids who can listen and pay attention. And then that really increases their buy-in for why they would teach other social skills, such as empathy.
So what I was hearing here is that you're creating kind of a full curriculum of activities that are kind of age specific. So as children are developing over from different ages, that they're kind of open to learning different aspects of empathy. So you're kind of sounds like you're kind of basing your work on what you've from the science of child development, and then you're developing the program kind of age specifically, so that children can kind of, that their empathy can be fostered and nurtured kind of at the most effective ways, and that's throughout the full curriculum then.
Correct.
And then you're looking at what's the payoff for empathy, and what are the benefits of empathy. So one of them is that it's making children better learners. Mm-hmm. Is that correct then?
That's right. That's right. And you know, the newest research, Joe Durlak and Roger Weisberg did a study that's really kind of a landmark study. It was a meta-analysis of hundreds of very high-quality research studies. You wouldn't believe the number they threw out. I mean, so they only picked really high-quality studies, and still they had hundreds to look at. And they found in these studies on social and emotional learning that if children go through a quality SEL program, it has to be evidence-based. That if teachers teach it and children learn it through school, they can raise their test scores by an average of 11 percentile points. Now, that isn't really the reason we started doing this. Make no mistake, Committee for Children's mission is not just to make kids better academically, right? We really believe in teaching empathy, social problem solving, because we really want children to become better human beings. That's really why we're here. But if we're going to do this in schools, we have to really help them see the connection. And this study, this big meta-analysis, really just took us light years ahead in that argument with schools. And that really helps teachers and school boards and principals and school district people, who are all being held accountable for this other thing, which is academic performance, to see the value of teaching empathy and other social skills to children in school. So it's become a big part of what you might think of as the value proposition for the work we do, for all of us collectively do in empathy, is that we have to build that value proposition for the people that we're counting on to scale up our programs. Committee for Children has 50 people. We're a nonprofit in Seattle. We can't scale up this work to 30,000 schools in the U.S. and 1,000 more around the world. We can't do it directly. Teachers are our agents of change. They're the people who are actually doing the hard work. We might think we do heavy lifting developing these very scientifically sound programs, but it's teachers who actually are doing, who are transforming. They're the people who are our heroes, actually doing this work with kids directly every day.
So you're wanting to support the teachers to make it as easy and supportive of their work as...
That's the other thing I would say is kind of a hallmark of our our philosophy about how this needs to work, is that if you make a really scientifically sound program, that's going to be great. I mean, of course you want that because you want it to be effective. That's the first thing you want, is to affect change. But if you make a scientifically sound program that's 300 lessons long, no one's going to do it. So it doesn't matter that you did it because it's never going to get scaled up. So our sweet spot at Committee for Children is finding that very thoughtful intersection between super research-based and also super easy and really fun to do for teachers. Because if it's not really engaging for the kids and it's not actually easy and fun for teachers, it doesn't really matter what the school board or the school district says. When the classroom door closes, teachers are going to do whatever they want. And this is something fundamentally that we know about teaching and learning and schools in general, is teaching is a very independent profession. So if we really want to follow our work right down to the classroom and say, are teachers really doing this? Are they really teaching the skills that we think they're teaching with this curriculum? We have to make it so worth it for them to do it. And so so our interface of our curricula are super easy. We've designed them, engineered them, kind of, if you can think of it as really engineering the program like an iPad or, any kind of really simple computer interface. Back in the day when I was first learning to use computers, I'm really old, think about the DOS programs that were out there and, just those Tandy computers and how you practically had to be a programmer yourself to be able to do it. That's kind of how SEL, social emotional learning for schools, was back in the old days. And as the field has evolved, one of the things we've really come to understand is if we don't make that kind of idea, that simple, fun, human, easy interface for teachers, they're not going to do this. So we have very cool materials that teachers find very simple to use. And I have some of those materials. I don't know if they'll translate, if I can show them to you, but I'd be happy to do that.
I'm on your website too. We have
oh, good.
Here the Committee for Children, was that cfchildren.org?
Right. Yeah. So, here's an example of a card. These are big 11 by 17 photo lesson cards, we call them. And I'm going to hold it up higher.
Yeah.
Maybe in the middle.
Oh, okay.
And this is a picture of a little girl named Sally, and this is an empathy lesson, and the lesson is called Feelings Change. So one of the things we know about empathy and learning about feelings for children is that they need to understand that not only do people have feelings, but people can have one feeling about something, and maybe 6 months later, they could have a very different feeling, and it's okay. That's actually healthy and right. So this is a lesson that helps children not get stuck in one idea about feelings. And on the back of the card, this is the back of that same lesson card, and you see a mini picture of Sally, so to orient the teacher to what the kids are looking at. And on the back is everything I need to teach that lesson. I have notes to me about what's the objective of this lesson. At the end of the lesson, what do I want children to know and be able to do? What's the language learning? So this is a very language-rich curriculum because we know that language and cognition are very deeply tied. So we want children to learn the language in this lesson of feelings. And what else do I need to do this? What are some teaching notes? And then here is the body of the lesson. And over on the right are things like the skill practice activity that I might do with the group. One of the things about our curriculum is it doesn't just sit and talk to kids. Children need to get up and they need to role play. They need to actually experience what it feels like to be in the shoes of another person. So many of our lessons include skill rehearsal or skill practice, so that in the relative safety of the classroom while the teacher is there, children can practice these skills. So that the hope is that then if they've practiced them and done a behavioral skill, they can go out into the playground and perhaps start to use those skills. So that's just one example, but I just wanted to give you kind of the interface there. And then, of course, we have a lot of, we have cool puppets. We've got this guy. His name is Impulsive Puppy. And he's like a lot of 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. He doesn't sit in his chair very long, and sometimes he's naughty and he doesn't listen to the teacher. But he has a friend named Slow Down Snail. And Slow Down Snail is teaching his friend in all the lesson warm-ups how to slow down, stop, and think before he acts. So children not only need to learn empathy and compassion for others, but also how to apply that in action when they're in a situation with someone. How do I apply that and solve a problem with someone? Well, first I have to calm down from my really big feelings that I have. And Puppy has a lot of those big feelings. So we use lots of multimedia. We have lots of digital media, videos for kids that for the younger children, we stay very light on video because we know that screen time is not particularly good for little kids. But we have a lot for teachers online too. So the other thing that's kind of cool about our newest version is that teachers here's their teaching guide they get in their curriculum kit. And down here is something called the product activation key. And they go online and they enter that key on our secondstep.org site, and they get inside and register. And now we have a connection with the teacher. And then the teacher can pick up the rest of the program online. And there's demonstrations of teachers teaching the curriculum in the classroom. So if I'm on lesson 6, I can see a teacher teaching lesson 6. And I can get some modeling for how to manage my classroom in that lesson. So we're building that out every day. That's like a major work for our organization. The curriculum itself is good. It's really important, and we have a lot of evidence that it is effective in teaching kids these skills. But our big delta is in knowing whether teachers are really teaching the program and how effectively they're teaching it. So we are building out this very rich, media-rich website so that teachers will almost not be able to help themselves, but really understand how to teach this effectively. And the real holy grail is actually not just whether kids learn the lesson in the classroom, but whether on the playground or throughout the rest of their day, they're applying these skills. Can teachers start seeing the evidence that kids are actually using these skills? And what about when there is a problem? How do teachers use the lessons they taught earlier in the day or earlier in the week to hearken children back to the skills they've already learned as a way of helping support them transitioning from, I learned how to be nice to someone in the classroom, but how do I learn that compassionate act once we're out on the playground and we're fighting over a ball? How do we now apply what we learned? So there's a lot more support that teachers need to help them do that transfer of learning from the classroom to real life. But that's our goal. Our goal is for kids to actually apply that learning once they're out in their real day-to-day relationships with each other.
Well, that's what I'm looking at. Is the cultural change that can take place, so that empathy becomes a real cultural, a conscious and explicit value within society. And it sounds like you're really building all the tools for kind of teaching that at the school level and making it very easy to implement as well. And what do you think about the larger quality aspect of the vision of a culture of empathy? You can be in the nuts and bolts of it, but there's a larger societal vision that we really need to raise up the value of empathy within society. And as the society has a support of empathy, that it'll naturally want to support the schools in fostering that.
Right. Well, here's what I would say. I have a couple things to say about that. One is that we at Committee for Children, and I think all of us in this field, have to be very patient people. We have to see that this is generational change we're talking about. So our vision is to have such a well-designed curriculum and so much fun and easy for teachers to use, and with so much great support that they will teach it effectively, that will start affecting millions of children every year. And children will start having this day-to-day, week-to-week experience in their schools. Of course, if we could get into children's homes and do it there, we would, but it's very difficult to do that. So we're looking at what is the change that's possible? Where can we reach children, and how can we help teachers at the same time so that they'll do it? And so our goal is to get this kind of consciousness change happening among millions of kids, and to keep that going through elementary school, through middle school, and as they graduate, so that they are really kind of inculcated with this learning from the time they're very little all the way through school. Our goal is for them to grow up to become the people who say, of course empathy is a value. I learned it for 9 or 10 years in school, and we practiced it every day. That's the goal we have. And, so that's going to take time. That isn't something that happens overnight. But that's okay, because generational change and culture change does take time. The other thing I'll say is that there's the culture change that needs to happen in the school that goes beyond just what's happening in the classroom with the teacher teaching skills to children. I'll be the first to say, our piece of the solution is not the whole solution. It's just a piece of it. So there are wonderful people out there who are doing work on school climate and culture change that's more about how are the adults behaving? How are the grown-ups modeling and practicing these skills themselves, so that when children learn a lesson from their teacher in how to calm down when they're angry, that's great. But if the teacher 3 minutes after the lesson is screaming at everybody, then what's the real lesson they're learning? So there is a lot of work going on in the field by wonderful colleague organizations around adult behavior. And our plan is not to do everything ourselves, but to partner with those people. Randy Sprick at the University of Oregon, Jeff Sprague at the University of Oregon, Rob Horner. These are all people in the positive behavioral support world, or Randy's program is called Safe and Civil Schools. These are people who are really kind of designing really high quality programs so that adults are walking the talk, that they're wearing the mantle of social and emotional competence and empathy as they're working with each other and with children. And then, of course, the other big issue is parents. We know that, particularly for young children, their social skills are heavily influenced by how they're raised at home. What are the skills that were modeled for them? How do parents interact when there's a conflict at home? So, there are also wonderful people out there focusing on parent involvement. We have materials that help parents understand what their kids are learning in school with Second Step. And all along the way, as kids are getting an empathy lesson, if they're getting a problem-solving lesson, we are linking parents in so that they can see how that works. But, that's not a whole solution around positive parenting. So there are other organizations doing fabulous work with that, and we think that's also a vitally important piece of the puzzle. So teaching kids social skills in school, super important. You don't want to not have that ingredient, but you need a lot more than that if we're going to have this big world culture change. So we're big believers in holding hands with the best of our colleagues who are doing the best, most, again, effective work. Can you prove that it's making a difference? And then how do we hold hands with each other so that when we go into a school or a system, we can say, we've got the social skills curriculum for teachers to use with kids and lots of great stuff around that. These people are going to do your school culture change work, and here's somebody who's doing the best work with parents. And these things are all very synergistic.
Yeah, so it's all the different aspects, the children, the teachers, the parents. And it's like
Hmm.
that I've heard it from teachers as well that, you know, teachers need support. Teachers need empathy.
Right.
It's not like they're this vessel that just pours out empathy. Somebody's got to pour the empathy into them
Oh, that
as
is
well.
so, so true. I mean, teachers, oh my gosh, our society is so pejorative on teachers. It's unbelievable. And they are the most, I mean, we should be paying them the most. We should be giving them the most nurturing and support. And, it seems as though we pay them the least and that we give them the least support. We're always tearing them down. So that shift has to happen. I mean, this is, teachers can't sustain the work they're doing, the brilliant work they're doing with kids each and every day without having that sense that they are valued and that people get what it means to be a teacher each and every day.
Yeah. So we need to support the teachers, we need to support the parents, so for
Hmm.
a cultural shift towards empathy, it's almost like everyone's under stress, and it's like, where do you start the chain reaction of empathy? You know, it's like to offer empathy, to be there, to be present, to listen, and we need to start creating that chain reaction. And if everybody's under stress, it just creates a chain reaction of stress. And
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's one reason, our belief is we're just entering that cycle. We're entering the chain. We're jumping into classrooms with a curriculum, and teachers are teaching this to children when they're very young through their elementary and middle school years. And there are great programs even out there for high school as well. And that you have to jump into the cycle because you've got to get in somewhere. And for us, we really believe where we've jumped in is a great place because we are looking at child development as kind of the foundation for what guides the way we teach these skills to children and when we teach them, so that we're leveraging their developmental path. We're leveraging what they would be learning anyway, or not learning, depending on their environment. And that is very important to us. But, just as important is how do teachers and parents and school administrators, how is everybody sort of building this ethos together? And but you've got to start somewhere. So, I think those of us who do this work, you might call us quite visionary to see this long view, but in fact, I think most of us are really practical people. We're just going, look, we just got to start. We've got to do this because if we don't do it, the alternative, we know what the alternative is. We're living it right now. Look around.
how would you describe this, what we have? I mean, that's one thing I'm looking at is what's the situation we have now, and what does this vision, this culture of empathy look like? Where are we now, and what's our vision of where we're going? Like, what would you describe the present situation as?
Well, it just doesn't seem to me that we live in a culture that's very empathically oriented. I mean, America is very much an independent-minded country. We value independent thinking. We don't value interdependence. We value people doing it alone, going it alone, being successful on their own. And that's tough, and it plays out in the political discourse that's happening. I shudder to think that children tune in to CNN and listen to these adults talking to each other in such a mean-spirited way. And we see it in the wars and conflicts around the world. People just have a basic inability to listen to each other, to just stop for a minute and listen. There's so much fear that if I listen to you, you won't hear me. And I just think sometimes our problems, our huge social problems and world conflict comes down to something very simple, which is people are just scared to stop and open up to other people. And in the U.S., we're not enculturated to that. It's not a value that we have. Other people is not our value. I am my value, and I'm gonna pursue that at every turn. So yeah, it's big work to try to make this shift. I think. I think our evidence is just in front of us every day that this isn't a value fundamentally that we hold in our culture. And so how do we make that shift? How do we start creating that sea change or that tipping point where people do start valuing it? I think it starts when people are very young, and we need to keep that going throughout their adolescence. And hopefully, if we can get millions of children in a generation to have learned these skills and practiced these skills and have actually felt the value of that opening up and being open to and listening to other people, that my hope is that they're going to do a much better job than we've done in our generation of affecting change. Now, I'm a child of the 60s. I thought we were going to change the world. It's kind of a bitter disappointment to see what the world is like still, because I really thought we were going to be the ones to make that difference. And so I feel like the work we're doing in building empathy and social consciousness in kids, this is very hopeful work. We could just be focusing on the bad kids, or we could just be doing work in prisons. I suppose there's lots of work, and there's great work to be doing. I'm so grateful that people are working with kids in that kind of higher tier behavior problem area. I'm so grateful that there are people who are doing offender treatment work. It's not the most hopeful work, because often a lot of that work is you're just pushing a rock uphill. So I feel like those are people that I hope stick with that. But I think the most hopeful work is really working with young children and saying, can we actually, affect a generation of kids who will become the change agents for the future?
And the other part of that was like, what is this vision that we have these children that are learning empathy and will bring it into the future? And what does that future look like? And for example, I would think that in the present political debate, where it's just it's us and them, and it's just conflict, that it would be actually people working together and solving problems. I mean, that's just one of the manifestations.
Right.
And it would be the politicians actually listening to each other and finding out what are your values, what are my values, how can we bring those together, and how can we work effectively to create social policies that further empathy and connection. And so I'm just wondering, what does the world look like if we have a culture of empathy? It's not too kumbaya, but it's like.
But, I think there's a great example that just came to my mind. Remember just a couple of weeks ago when, the horrible mistake was made by the, I guess it was OPEC. I can't remember which the body it was, but that burned the Koran.
The NATO.
Yeah, NATO, sorry. And they were very, they got, it was like, whoa, that was really a bad idea. And what were they thinking? And I thought it was fabulous that our president got up and apologized. That's a lesson in our curriculum. We teach 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, kids at every age, that when you do something to somebody, you make an apology. Every parent in the world, I hope, is given that lesson to their children. That's just human relations 101, right? And yet, here we are in a society that kind of made him wrong for doing what we teach 5-year-olds to do, to simply apologize. And so, I would say the future that I would see is not that we're never going to have conflict. We will always have conflict. We're human beings. And, let's face it, we've got to be realistic. We have countries with borders. It's not imagine there are no countries, because really there will be countries, and there will be people who want to have more land than the other people, or to decide for the other people what they're going to have. And but I think that if we can build some skills among a population or a whole generation of kids, someday they're going to be sitting at those tables. Someday they're going to be at the negotiation table. And our vision is that, we've got kids in Iraq learning second step. We've got kids in all over Europe, in Japan, in South America. So we're really looking to expand the work that we do so that when children become the leaders of the future and they're sitting around a negotiation table with each other, that they will bring this ethos with them, this idea that I listen to you, that I apologize if I offend you, that I work on a problem-solving model, which they will have all learned in school, a similar mental model for how we solve a problem, that first you identify the problem, and then you come up with numerous solutions, and then you evaluate the solutions based on equitable, a fair way of distributing these ideas. And then you choose a solution and use it, and you evaluate it. If kids can get through that kind of learning and come out the other side with those skills, someday they're going to be the people who are making the decisions. And I think they're going to be better equipped than we have been to handle these situations. So that's my hope for the future.
Yeah, you were talking about conflict, and there's a quote by Johan Galtung, who's a Norwegian, and he had started a lot of these peace and conflict studies in the university. And essentially the quote goes, peace is resolving conflict with empathy, nonviolence, and creativity, and it's a never-ending process. And something in that formula, or in that quote, something that gets kind of forgotten, it seems to me, is the empathy part of it. That really, the empathy is so foundational in conflict resolution.
It absolutely is, and a lot of conflict resolution models don't recognize that. I think that is something that we uniquely get. That, like, if one of the skills, one of the first steps in our problem-solving unit, which, by the way, comes after the empathy unit on purpose, is that you have to take the other person's point of view. You have to take their perspective to understand how would they state the problem, because it might be different from how you state it. And if you're going to stand in someone's shoes and take their perspective, you better have some empathy, or you're not going to be able to do that. And we know that the people in our worlds that are the best leaders and the best colleagues are the people who can step out of their own myopic perspective and see the perspective of others and appreciate the perspective of others. That's what makes them a great problem solver, right? Is that they kind of get, hey, there has to be something in it for you too, not just for me. As I said at the beginning, if all we teach is problem solving or conflict resolution, we could just end up with a generation of very skilled sociopaths. And that isn't really very helpful. In fact, we've just made the world a lot worse because now they have a lot more skills. So, empathy absolutely is foundational. If you're going to teach kids to resolve conflicts and you only teach them to resolve them so that they can get what they want, we haven't really bridged the gap.
Yeah, that was something, I recently took some conflict resolution workshops, and I thought, oh my goodness, if I would have learned this in school, starting at an early age, it would have been so helpful. And I wonder, is your program, does it actually kind of explicitly do conflict resolution? Maybe some of, like, what would be called restorative justice, or
not so much restorative justice or student court. It's more it's really a problem-solving model that allows children to resolve conflicts, but empathy is at the base of that model. It's the most foundational thing to problem solving. And the model that we teach kids, the steps that they learn, are very much rooted in that idea that empathy is the first step in problem solving. And so, as kids get older, they learn to apply problem solving to situations that are developmentally likely to occur in their environment. So they will apply it in a bullying situation when they're in middle school. They'll also apply the empathy skills to situations of bullying. And when they're much younger, it may have to do more with sharing toys, or, what do we do when two children want to play with one toy at the same time? what are the different solutions to that? So, it plays out differently at different ages, but, and what I know is that the high school programs really often focus more on restorative justice in their conflict resolution model. We've seen a lot of schools use second step for problem solving and conflict resolution and tie that to a peer mediation program. So the kids that are out on the playground are actually just reinforcing those same skills kids learned in second step in the classroom.
Yeah. Regarding the restorative justice, sometimes I think it would be better renamed as restorative empathy.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's really that we want to create a culture that is the experience of empathy, that we're connecting, listening on an ongoing basis, and that if there's a conflict, that we need to restore the empathic connections. That's kind of why I'm using the kind of organized our organization around building a culture of empathy, to really focus on explicitly having that value, because a lot of times the empathy is just something that kind of happens, right? It's just, and it's almost like we're unconscious of that empathy within society, and somehow it seems to me that making it explicit, this is explicitly what we're wanting, is empathy, and actually naming it, giving it a name.
I agree with you. I think that's very true. There is new research on, a term called metacognition. Carol Dweck is one of the great researchers in this area, looking at, if you tell children that this is what they're learning and why, it can actually really advance their skills in this area. Some of her research is on brain development, and how if you teach children from a very young age that they can actually improve their brain by watching less television, reading more, doing puzzles, working on social problems, and practicing empathy and problem solving, that these kinds of behaviors actually really improve your brain. And as they get older, you can say, look, if you're using drugs and alcohol when you're an adolescent, this is going to really stunt your brain, and here's why, here's the information about it. It can actually really have a profound impact on children's brain development. And in a similar way, I think if we give them the meta message that you're learning empathy for a reason, and here's why, here's the vision we have for you. We want you to become the architects of a better world, and you're not going to be able to do that without this. That's a great message for kids to hear, like, this is how we'll apply it when we grow up. Why not give them that message when they're young and help them join the vision that we have to say, someday you're going to be the people who are going to take this out and make the world a better place.
Well, one thing I like to ask people, about empathy is, well, there's the definition of empathy is often standing in someone else's, it's the metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. And everyone has their own metaphor. If you don't use that one, I found people always come up with their own. I was wondering, do you have a personal metaphor if you didn't use one of those? What would empathy be like to you?
I really, I often do use the term standing in someone else's shoes because it's so common and people get it, when I'm talking to others. But I really think it's about, I forget who the poet was that said this, but, part of the poem was, I hold your heart, I hold it in my heart. And that's really how I think of empathy, that I'm really holding the heart of another person. And that's a delicate thing. And it's something to be really very treated with great respect and with great care. That is not something you just toss around, right? So I think when I think about it myself, that's how I think of it, as really holding someone else's heart in my heart. And how would I do that?
Well, Joan, this has been a very inspiring, one of the most inspiring dialogues I've had with someone. So
it was fun for me too.
I'm so grateful.
You. And I found you very inspiring and very exciting to talk with. I'm so glad you're doing this work to elevate just the concept of empathy in human beings. It's so important.
Well, I think this is to be continued. We've gone for about an hour, so we'll stop here, but we're definitely, I think, going to keep going. Maybe I'm hoping to do some panels as well, so we can get maybe some other people. If there's,
I'd love to.
We can do it on Skype. So if there's, 3 or 4 other people that you feel would be really that you'd like to get on a panel to have this discussion.
I can give you ideas about that too.
Oh, great. Well, we'll do that by email, and
all right.
I'll stop the recording here.
Right.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.